Okie dokie. Hello, welcome to Third Act Thursday, where we are going to have Megan continue her story from a couple weeks back or 3 weeks ago. Megan, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. Okay. So we sent you the podcast. You know where to pick it up. I believe it was when you left Save on Foods. Is that correct? Okay, cool. Let's go from there.
Oh gosh, where do you want me to start with that?
So I'm
Why I
thinking,
left?
yeah. Honestly, because the why you left is important, right? What
Mm,
led you up to leaving? Was it a feeling of more? Was it a feeling of, on
mhm,
feeling unfulfilled, life, unlived? Like, what was it? A
mhm.
combination of things? What led you to leaving a job that honestly you could have,
Could have stayed there forever.
stayed there. You
Yeah,
could have been the
yeah,
next deli manager. You could have been then an
yeah,
ASM, right? You could have
yeah,
right? You could have, like, the last 10 years, you could have been
for sure.
either close to or not being a store manager right now, right? So what made you
Yeah,
leave?
yeah. So, my story I find always interesting because when I hear people's stories of change, usually they talk about how unhappy they are, and that's
Mhm.
what kind of precipitates the change, right? But
Right.
that wasn't my story. I wasn't like grossly unhappy.
Mm,
I was just kind of meh,
sure.
but that was not good enough for me.
Right. Yeah.
And so my career at Save On Foods, I would say, was successful when I chose to start moving up because I started there when I was 16. So once I
Yeah.
kind of got into like my late teens, early 20s and thought to myself, like, yeah, okay, I want to start moving up. I moved up really quickly, like in a matter of, I don't even know, like a year and a half. I went from like part-time to assistant manager, deli manager. Um, and was sent all over the place and got like lots of good feedback a lot. And so I do feel like I probably would have just continued to move up the ladder, but I didn't feel challenged in the way that I wanted to be challenged. I felt challenged in terms of like interpersonal dynamics and kind of
Mm,
stuff that I felt was a little bit beneath my um, like maturity level. Sorry, you're gonna call
mm,
spade a spade, but I just didn't like that dynamic of it. I really wanted to learn and use my brain.
right.
And that's why I kept moving up because I was like, okay, I want to learn this now, right? And I want to learn this now. And then I would kind of master the skill really quickly and get bored again.
Mm,
And even though I didn't know where that was gonna leave me, I knew that it wasn't there.
yeah. Interesting. And like you're saying, like you're mentioning, there's a lot of people when they have, like, there's patterns for why people change, right?
Hmm.
And oftentimes, I don't know how you find it with your in your line of work there, when people do change, how often they are uncertain of what's going to
Hmm.
be on the other side, right? Some people, that's the reason they don't change, is because they don't have a definitive picture of what it's going to look like. And that
Yeah,
is enough to be like, you know what? The devil I know is better than, and then
totally.
they live in this, like, holding pattern of meh, right? And some people are fine with meh because it's just like, yeah,
Totally.
you're right.
It's
It's
safe,
could be
right?
worse, it's safe, could be worse, right? That kind of mentality. So yeah, so what, and let's for folks that know a little bit about your story, like with your mom has the background in, like, in social
Yeah.
work, right? So was
Mhm.
that something that appealed to you? Like, why did you pursue the
Wasn't
path?
really, yeah, it wasn't really. It was so kind of serendipitous how it all came about. I wasn't
Mm,
even looking into new career opportunities for me. I was looking into them for my spouse at the time,
mhm.
and then came across the bachelor's program for social work. And just the description of it and the way that they wrote it all up didn't even almost sound like anything that my mom did, even though, of course, she
Oh.
was in the field. But my mom has always worked in, she's retired now, but had always worked in mental health and addictions. And so I just
Mm,
thought that that was what it was, but this just described it completely differently. And every time I've been meant to make a big change in my life, there's always been a pattern of this like overwhelming sense of fear that comes over me, and then I panic. And it was so weird that I felt panicky reading a course description that wasn't even for me.
right.
But when I talked about how like it resonated with me, and then all of a sudden I just had this light bulb moment that like that's what I was supposed to be doing. My spouse at the time was like, yeah, like that's obviously what you need to be doing. And
Cool.
so it worked out that he actually stayed because he also worked for Save On. He stayed at Save On, and
Right.
I went to school. And
Wow.
I was super scared. I was terrified. Even when I was just sending in the application, I remember crying about it. And it was like, what am
Mm.
I don't understand why I'm crying, but that's a symptom of my anxiety. When I get that heightened, I will just cry.
Yeah, I remember you saying that's like, and it's almost like a signal from your brain or
Mhm.
from your emotions that you're on the right track, right? Because you've
Yeah,
used that a few times where you're just like, okay,
I have.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, which is interesting, right? But
Yeah.
it's because I imagine the first time that ever happened, you're just like, why am I getting so
Yeah.
emotional about something that I want to do, or you know what I mean? But it's like,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
Totally. And every time that I've done it and just kind of blindly gone forward and taken a step, it's always worked out like amazing for me. I'm somebody that really trusts in like the universe and those types of signals that I get. I didn't
mm,
know where this line of work was going to take me or where I would end up. It took
yeah,
me nowhere where I would thought I would end up because when I went into social work, I really had a passion, or I thought I had a passion for wanting to work with children because I love kids.
mm,
And then I had the opportunity to do a practicum with children's services, and I was like, absolutely not. This is not
yeah.
for me.
You're
Not for
like,
me.
yeah. You're like, I like my own children. That's about it. Thanks. No.
Yeah, it was just way
Yeah.
too hard because I
Yeah.
love children. It was too hard for me to work with them in such sad situations.
Yeah. Okay. That makes
And
sense.
then the practicum that I was the least excited about in home care, I got a practicum and I was like, what? Like, this sucks. Like, I didn't even tick that off on the list because you got to select what kind of, fields you would want to work in.
Yeah.
I worked there for 8 years and I loved it.
Wow. Isn't that fascinating? And, to have a thread kind of going through the shows that we're doing this week, getting it back into the whole idea of like acceptance or surrender is just like, you know,
Yeah,
when you truly do that, it's like the universe will give you what you need, but a lot of times it looks very different than your
totally.
expectations or your
Yeah.
right. So, and that's super cool because that would not happen if you're not open at that point to that feedback or that, like you say, you surrendered to that feeling, right? Had you
Yeah.
not, it's, had you forced the kids thing, like who knows what would have happened, right? You might not,
Mhm.
might not be having this conversation, might not have led you up to, the state that you're in right now. So yeah,
Mhm.
fascinating stuff. So now that you're, so you did that for 8 years and, may as well, complete the story here because it's like that took you to another stage in your life and
Yeah.
another, hat to put on, so to speak. So, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're speaking about now. Like
Mhm.
where did this, after that 8 years, what did that lead you to?
So very similar story in that I got comfortable in my position. I wasn't really growing or learning anything anymore. And I was on maternity leave though at this time. And you get sometimes I would get bored if my kids were sleeping and I would just look at job postings just to kind of see what was out there.
Yeah.
Like I came across the posting for the job that I'm doing now and just like threw my name in the hat. Never thought it would come of anything. And it did. Ended up getting the position and
Yeah.
it was like, I don't even know how that happened. And
Yeah.
then for years, I think I told you this, my mom kept saying to me, like, you should open up your own private practice and you should do
Yeah.
counseling. And that just like didn't quite jive with me. I was like, I don't think that's what I'm supposed to be doing, but yet it kind of sounds like I want to do.
Mm.
And then once you and I connected, I mean, we've stayed connected for a long time, but we kind of
Hmm.
go through bouts of talking and not talking. And
Yeah.
just through our conversation, it was like, okay, now the pieces are fitting together. Like this
Mm.
sounds more in alignment with what I enjoy doing because, you know, I don't want to have to pull people along. I really want to support them in uncovering their own strengths and tools and providing some teaching, but just being like a support to them. And so that's why this role felt really good. And so had you and I not connected and had that conversation, I don't think any of this would have unfolded for me. It's so
Right.
it's so wild because if you think back to when I was in school, you were still living south of White Ave
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
me coming to see you, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And then
Yeah.
now it's like, is it 10 years later, 12 years later? I don't
Yeah.
even know. I don't want to age myself here, but
Yeah.
and then it like
Yeah.
totally flipped
Yeah,
and you've been supporting me. It's just so, I don't know, it's just really cool the way
it
that
is
the
cool.
world like
Yeah.
kind of comes full circle.
Yeah, it is. It's a cool story for sure. And I like, I think I've stolen it from you because like I love the phrase like meet me where I am, or meet whoever where they are, meet your clients where they are, like that kind of
Yeah.
idea, right? So
Yeah.
I really like that. I've been using that a lot. That's kind of like my mantra now, is because I
Mhm.
tend to jump ahead 2 or 3 years sometimes. You know me, I have a lot, I'm full of ideas,
Yeah, you're a
but
dreamer.
oftentimes the ideas are like, okay, well, you know what, that's like 2 years down the road. Let's do one thing at a time here, right? So, and that's all about me meeting me where I am, right? So now I'm at the stage where I've done all these certifications and yada yada. So I'm meeting myself. I'm honoring myself in the work I've put in, instead of constantly seeking and trying to almost like outrun myself. I'm just like, no, I
Yeah,
have done this. I've done, like, I put the reps in. So like, let's do this now. So like,
totally.
and so like, I like to thank you for that advice, because that was, a great piece. And yeah, for you, like, I like the idea that you've, identified what you want to be able to bring to the table. You liked, I'm assuming, and fill in the blanks for me, but like, you like the idea of, what do you, actually, no, I'll ask the question instead of putting words in your
Okay.
mouth. What do you like about, what's appealing to you about having your own practice, about like doing the coaching, eventually transferring or transitioning into your basically being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I mean, definitely the flexibility of my schedule. My priorities have shifted big time since becoming a mom. Prior
Mm,
to being a mom, like I definitely was probably borderline workaholic. And I really prided myself on like putting in the extra time. And I would even
yeah.
like say it, right? Like, well, I didn't even take a lunch hour today.
Yeah.
Now, if I say that to, first of all, that doesn't even happen now. But if it did happen now, it would
Yeah.
not be a source of pride for me.
Right. Which is
I would
good.
be like, that's
Yeah.
insane. Like,
Yeah.
why are you not taking a lunch hour? Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, being an entrepreneur has a lot of appealing things besides just the schedule. I mean, I think it's something to like put my stamp on, and gives me the opportunity to create something that's mine
Mm,
and not have any kind of outside input as to what's a good idea or a bad idea, and just
mm,
really trust my intuition and trusting in my story, because my story was a source of shame for me for a little bit. I
mhm.
didn't like the label of postpartum depression, and
Yeah.
wasn't
And
something that I even talked about until like a couple months ago, I think.
mm,
Really, yeah. Like
yeah.
I never talked openly about it, and I pushed myself to do that. And so now it's like taking that kind of pain point and turning it into something that I actually am really proud that I went through and overcame. And now I'm like using it as a source of positivity to put back into the world.
Yeah. 100%. And that's super cool. Now, so you go from like, and we're fairly paralleled in that sense, where I've like, within close friends and so forth, knew about my, you know, uh, alcoholism and such, but to now we're both like going on podcasts to complete
Yeah.
strangers and be like, yeah, so this happened, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm all good now. But yeah, so it's but it's like, it's so therapeutic for me. I want to know what it's like for you, but it's like, and honestly, like, one of the, again, when we talk like the unexpected things that the universe gives you, and I guess I just I didn't think of it, but like, by putting the story out there, there's like this extra layer of sort of accountability for myself to stay sober, because like, I'm putting it
Mm,
out there now. So I'm like, well, this is now out there. So it's
yeah.
not this like, gray area where like, I've only told a few people, so I could probably get away with like, going back to going back there. It's just like, no, this is like 100%, like, I'm ready to, this is who I am and my story. And then
Mm,
from there, like, I heard it years ago on a podcast, a great quote, and it's like, vulnerability promotes credibility. Because when people
yeah.
see that your story is so like, wow. And that's honestly, like, we had another good conversation I had recently, is like, what does authenticity mean to you? And one of
Mhm,
the one of the guys said, he's like, it wasn't necessarily the definition, but it was like the context which you can be authentic within, and
mhm.
that is safety. So if you feel safe enough to tell your story, it lowers the guard. I'm thinking in a context of like, if I go to like a meeting, or if I'm talking to somebody else that's been through the same thing, if I'm talking to somebody else that's recovering from alcohol, there's just this like immediate drop of persona, of like
Mhm.
ego. And it's just like you talk on this like authentic, that's the word, authentic comes in, because there's this like safety created by the fact that like you've been through the same thing. And then there's like that's where that like really vulnerable energy can like connect with people in a very
Yeah.
profound way. So
Yeah.
are you finding the same thing with yours, like with you getting your story out on the podcast and such?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just really trying to normalize it,
Yeah. Yeah.
normalize the conversation around it. And even when I talk about my own journey now, because of course everybody is like, well, what do you do now? And what did you do to get better? And how do you lead this like perfect balanced life now? And I'm like, I don't. Like,
Yes,
let's
exactly.
like just
Yeah.
talk about
Make no
that. Like,
mistake. Yeah. I am not
yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
I am not perfect, and that's
Yeah.
important to talk about too, that yes, I have made leaps and bounds from where I was.
Mm,
And yes, I pick up way quicker if I'm slipping, right? But I still
yeah.
slip. I still have
Yeah.
days
Yeah.
where I don't prioritize myself, still
Mm.
have moments where I think I'm a bad mom. It's just that the recovery time on that is like way shorter, way shorter.
Yeah.
I do
Right.
not sit in a cycle of shame for days and days and days. I
Right.
might start getting into a cycle of shame and I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes,
Yeah.
Megan. I can pull myself out.
Yeah.
And having that conversation with people is really important for me too, because it's not easy work. Like it's not. And so
Mhm.
to think that it's going to get easier is true. I mean, it gets easier, but it's not just an automatic response for me to always prioritize myself. I don't know how it is for you, but
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
have the urge to fall back into old habits.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, like you say, you just get a quicker reaction time to it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's practice. It's like it's literally is what it is. It's practice. It's not you know. And the other thing that was interesting to think of is that somebody else had brought up as well in a conversation recently. Is like, okay, so if you everything's context, right? So if you have a context of something that's like a trigger for you, and you just really isolate that and you iron that out and it's all good. It's kind of like the COVID variant. All of a sudden there's a variant of the same thing that pops up over here. And like, oh man, I forgot, like that is triggering too. I've just been focused on this and this is still going to
Yeah.
get me. So it's like you say, it's like
Yeah.
ongoing, and
Yeah.
you do a really good job of balancing, you know, the, the good, the bad, and the not ugly, but like the good and the bad of
Yes,
like
there's some ugly.
right? Yeah, right. Of parenting, right? And that you do a
Yeah.
good job of portraying that in your like social media and everything, which I commend you for, is because you do tell the whole story. And I'm getting better at it, but like the sober culture, for example, it is a lot, and it should be, and I'm glad it's all because it is. It's about like normalizing it, and it's
Mhm.
celebrating the wins, whether it's friggin' 48 hours, 9 hours, 9,000 days. Celebrate the wins, right? And that's part of the normalization process as well. But the same token, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit harder to find the people that are, unless you go into maybe like a Reddit thread or like a support group thread that's a little more
Yeah.
privatized.
Yeah.
I guess my point is like when like what's out there is often like the the celebrating the wins, which is great, but it doesn't have the other side of it, which I
Yeah,
want to start bringing, because like same thing with me, like
absolutely.
I don't get, it hasn't been, you know, what's the
Easy.
sunshine and lollipops or whatever, like it hasn't,
Yeah,
it's not like that, right? So
totally. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I know that there's definitely people that are like, "Oh, you get on Instagram and you're just, like, complaining, you must hate your kids," and to those people, I just send, like, a big virtual hug because there's something
Mm.
in them that feels really shameful or guilty about just saying their truth, you know?
Yeah.
Saying that I need a break does not equal that I hate my kids.
100. Well, yeah,
And
exactly.
I'm,
Like,
like,
how do
rock
you,
solid in that, so it doesn't bother
yeah,
me, but I know there
sure.
are people that are not rock solid in it, and that's why I
Mm.
talk about it.
Mm.
And, on the flip side, for you, I haven't had the same experience as you, but as somebody that loves connection and loves relating to others through similar stories, I think there's, like, a huge PowerPoint to be said if you were to get on Instagram and just say, like, "You know what? I was walking down the street today and it happened to be 25 degrees, and it just being 25 degrees made me wanna go and sit on a patio and have a beer." 'Cause
Yeah.
I bet you
Yeah.
100,000 other people would be like, "Yeah, warm weather
Yeah.
is triggering for me,"
Yeah, for
or,
sure.
"Yeah, this is triggering for me," and like, "Oh, you feel that too? Okay, well, if you
Yeah.
feel that too, then that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me and that I'm weak.
Totally. It's like a permission to, yeah, it's funny because like, so I had
Be
2
human.
interviews. Yes. It's an invitation / permission. Right. And a couple of the interviews I did, I've done, I think a few anyways today anyways. And the one that I did that we were talking about, something that's like you're super charged with shame and you've kind of hidden it. And then when you bring it up to somebody, and then they're just kind of like, oh man, that was like, that's a Tuesday morning for me. And then all of a sudden it's like permission to like not only release the shame, but it's like
Yeah,
add some laughter to it. When you laugh at something that was
totally.
previously like paralyzing to you, it's kind of like when you laugh at the devil, he runs away, right? So to be
Yeah.
able to get to that stage where you can have that release, that emotional release, whether it's like crying or laughing. I mean, probably
Yeah.
for me, preferably laughing, but you know, whatever works. So anything to get that like stagnant shame energy that's been holding you hostage for so long and just allowing it to happen just because somebody's like, that's all good. I did that 5 times in 1 week, you know, instead of, yeah. And
Totally.
that's something that you've been like, oh my God, I can't tell anybody about this. Right. So
For
yeah,
sure. And
for
it's
sure.
like, I know that it won't resonate with anybody, and my story doesn't resonate with everybody, but that's
Yeah,
not my goal. My goal is not to
exactly.
resonate with everybody. My goal is to show up
Yeah.
in a way that is authentic to me. And even if there's nobody listening to that story, I'm listening to it because when I say it out loud, it's almost like a recording to myself. And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
allowing myself the permission to just speak my truth. And
Yeah.
all those feelings of guilt and shame
Mhm.
honestly get less and less and less every time that I talk about it. That if somebody came to my face and told me that I was a horrible mother, I would literally be like, I'm not. Like it
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
even
just like
penetrate
this,
me.
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
because trust me, I've said a lot worse things to myself, and I've done the
Right.
work to
Yeah,
really truly change my belief patterns around those narratives.
right. So at
So,
that point, it's like, you know, it's just like arrows off armor, just pew, pew. You're like, yeah, I got nothing. Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. No, great job and great motivations, great reasons for doing it. I'm still finding a little bit of um actually, you know what? I'm going to save this next phrase for our next episode, which is F up Friday. The
Oh,
first
nice.
this will be your first edition of this. So actually I got to write it down before. Yes. Okay, got it. So F up Friday, just because you haven't done an episode with me yet, Megan, is I was talking about normalizing, so this is perfect. Just normalizing you know, things that normally you'd get like really down on yourself for doing. And it's kind of like a safe environment to like bring that up. And
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And just be like, you know, it's kind of, it's right in the same vein of what we're kind of finishing off this episode with, where it's just like by bringing it to light and giving it some laughter, it's going to relieve you of this like potential inner dialogue of like, I screwed up again. Dang, I
Right.
always right, that kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
in the same kind of way as like what if Wednesday does for the what ifing the good stuff. It's F up Friday is like bringing some levity to that, like, you know, like the imposter syndromes or the inner, you know, like the evil inner dialogue in us, right? And kind of giving that some room to go. So
Mhm.
yeah, thanks for coming for part 2 of your episode today. That was a really good episode. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And we'll see you guys on F up Friday.
See ya.